The public lands rule creates a leasing scheme, and this leasing scheme makes it possible for billionaires, NGOs, and corporations to basically gain control of public lands through these leases. And that would be all 245 million acres of BLM land. And so when I see groups saying this, which they all say this over and over and over again, these groups here, when I ask them, well, why aren't you explaining the leasing scheme or the leasing component of this? Because that's the biggest part of this rule. This is the response I get. None of them want to talk about the leasing scheme. And so what this rule does is it creates what's called a conservation lease that they divide up into two parts. One's called a restoration lease, one's called a mitigation lease. And they downplay this. They make it sound like, oh, these are just leases to go do conservation work. But let's ask the question, like, why does this have to be done through the form of a lease? And let's look at how the BLM defines a lease. They say a lease shall be used to authorize use of public lands involving substantial construction, development, or land improvement, and the investment of large amounts of capital, which are to be amortized over time. A lease conveys a possessory interest. Stop and remind ourselves what possessory interest means, and this means it's the right to occupy and use a property, which is distinct from full ownership. We're never saying that these leases give over title of the BLM land to these entities, but it does give them the right to occupy and use, which means the right to occupy and control a property for a specific period, but not own it outright. It also grants the right of exclusive use. And in the case of these conservation leases through the public lands rule, they did say that they would allow casual use. We're going to talk about what casual use means, but in another video. But spoiler alert, it means not motorized recreation. It's a very limited number of uses that qualify as casual use. And so back to this definition, a lease is something that conveys the possessory interest, which is different from like a permit, which conveys no possessory interest. It involves large amount of time and involves large amounts of money, which means the purpose of the public lands rule is to invite large amounts of money to come in, create these leases so that the leaseholders can now control and have a possessory interest in our public lands. Those of us who've done like reclamation work and ecological restoration work on public land know you don't need a lease to do that. You can do that through a simple volunteer agreement, or they have these permits that are a lot less involved. The requirements are lower and they don't transfer that possessory interest. Which begs the question why these groups don't want to talk about it, many of which are funded by foreign billionaires. Why don't they want to talk about the lease component of the public lands rule and the possessory interest it gives to the leaseholder?